but it's not going to be the first time that a coaching staff decide on the end of the season not to keep going. But understand that always is in the opposite way, that always is the owners or the sporting director.
We just got some interesting comments from Todd Boehly, from Mauricio Pochettino. It's the end of the season, 3 games left, 2 game weeks, 1 double game week, 1 single game week, 2 games away, 1 game at home, and suddenly, all hell breaks loose, right? We've got plenty of injured players that came back for the last games of the season. Suddenly, momentum, sentiment has completely changed with regards to Chelsea, with regards to Pochettino, with regards to the team's performance. Todd Boehly comes out with some positive comments, some comments that were taken out of context and put on social media, talking about the brand, revenue, etc., making money. There's more context to that. Then we've got more recently the press conference with Mauricio Pochettino talking a bit about his future, the decision management or the decision that he will be making. More on that later in this video. First of all, thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate all the support, all the new subscribers. Really appreciate that. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It's free. It's going to be one hell of a ride, I can promise you that. I first want to start off with a couple of points here that were mentioned by Dean on Twitter or X. So Chelsea are 4th in the league based on expected goals. Only 4 teams have lost fewer games than Chelsea this season. Only 5 teams have scored more goals than Chelsea. Based on the last 17 games, Chelsea are 4th in the Premier League. Now, of course, we know this is nice, but we are not in the top 4. We have not won a single trophy, so why should we care? Well, you should care because this proves that although our position in the league is not great at all, which I think we can all agree, I think the bosses, Pochettino, the staff, the players, the fans, we're all on the same line when it comes to the position of our team in the Premier League. But if you look at the way we're playing, there are plenty of games where we're just the better team, the more dominant team, but we did not manage to win those games. At the end of the day, it's a sport that is based on results. It's based on how many points can you gather throughout the season. The more points you get, the higher you will be in the standings. It doesn't mean that the team that has more points than you is a better team. No, maybe sometimes they were luckier than you, maybe you've been unlucky, or sometimes, like we this season, you've got more injuries, less consistency, change of ownership, complete change of teams. These have an impact on how your team will perform throughout the season. But if we look at those stats again, you cannot tell me that this is not a major improvement from last season. To me, I see the progress here. I truly hope in the summer that Pochettino and the team get the necessary player to bring us to the next level. Then, more recently, there was an interview with Todd Boehly, couple of comments on Chelsea, on the business, on the expansion, on the players, on the performances. I want to touch here on a couple of comments with regards to the last 2.5 games, at least in the second half at Aston Villa, which again, we've talked about that on the channel. First half was Aston Villa just taking their opportunities and being more clinical. It's not that we played extremely bad, but no, again, you can dominate a game, doesn't mean that you're going to win it. And then we had the Tottenham game, which is the complete opposite. We took our chances, but we were not as dominant as the other games. The West Ham game, complete domination there. So he says, we were playing just beautiful football. It was so fluid, it was exactly the way we drew it up. Funny enough, we drew it up, he didn't draw up anything. When we came out of the back, built up and moved up the pitch, it was very organized and the number of shots we had on board. In those 2.5 games, you could really start to see what we're working on coming together. And this is, to me, feels like someone that only looks at the data and doesn't actually look at all the games. Maybe he watches most of the games, but when you look at those comments right here, it does feel like they're coming from a data perspective. We know that they're very, very reliant on data, especially when it comes to signing players, looking at potential players. But in my opinion, the data doesn't tell the full picture. There are plenty of players where the data would suggest that it's a horrible player, but then suddenly, just because the sentiment, just because of the confidence, just because of the mindset of the player, the performances are 10 times better than someone that had better data. He finished off here. Even the commentary has changed over the last 2.5 games. I've never seen anything change so quickly. Then talking a bit about the Premier League in the United States, how the Premier League is the best league in the world, the most popular one, etc., and how that's expected to grow in the United States. So the fan fest that the Premier League do from city to city, you see them, it only builds momentum. Hopefully, Chelsea midfielder Cole Palmer will become a household name here soon. He's been a phenomenon for us, and so we're thinking hard about how we continue to expand our brand in the United States. That's ultimately a priority as well. This was taken a bit out of context, put on X by some big social media accounts that are supposed to be Chelsea fans, and a lot of people just ran with it, or they're just looking at this from a money-making perspective, etc., which again, I agree, sometimes they do look at these types of things as just a way to make more money. But you have to look at it from the whole story. Continue by saying here, one of the things that the Premier League clubs have is worldwide marks they can use. We've got a global group of players from Argentina to Brazil. I mean, we've got a couple of players from those areas, but not that many. Part of the long-range plan will be really to extend the brand as much as possible to build a fan base, because ultimately, the larger our fan base grows, the more competitive we will be able to be, because these salary caps are based on revenue. This is the thing. It was all in the context of talking about a max cap when it comes to teams in the Premier League, becoming a league that's a bit more competitive, not that only the top teams will be able to spend unlimited money while the smaller ones will never be able to compete. It's a bit like in the NBA, probably in other leagues as well. There is a cap on how much a team might spend, on how much players can earn at a club. And so it makes sense when you look at all of those comments and put it into context, it makes sense that they're talking a bit about generating revenue, because at the end of the day, if you can generate more and more revenue, you will be allowed to attract more players, to pay more for those players, and for those players to earn more money. It makes sense. Yes, they are looking at it from a more business perspective than maybe Roman Abramovich did. And he basically said this. In order to compete, you have to have growing revenue. And I think a brand like Chelsea really allows for that. Growing that brand, especially globally, is predicated on winning. I think that winning is at the top of the things that's most important. When you're attracting a new fan, the key is to have something that's really aspirational. The fact that Chelsea right now still have quite a lot of fans worldwide, still have young players that want to play for Chelsea, even though we've not really been at the top of our game for quite a while. We haven't won the league since Antonio Conte, is because our previous teams were winning, which of course means that we will have to go back to our winning ways sooner rather than later, or we might face the, let's say, Arsenal problem in the future, where they haven't won anything for many, many years. And so players, up-and-coming players, what are they going to say? Oh, it's been my dream to play at Arsenal or at Spurs because, well, they haven't won a trophy in 20 years. I don't think that's a way to attract top talent. No, we can attract top talent because we have been winning Champions League, Premier Leagues. I mean, great players from everywhere around the world were playing for our club. We cannot forget about the most important thing in football, and that's a winning culture. Now, switching to Pochettino, because to get to that winning culture, you need a team, you need a great structure, you need a good manager as well. And so, Poch's future at Chelsea. Chelsea will stick to their plan of holding an end-of-the-season review in the days after the club's final game against Bournemouth, which will ultimately determine the future of head coach Mauricio Pochettino. Pochettino will have 1 year remaining on the contract he signed last summer at the end of the season, although Chelsea hold an option to extend it by a further 12 months. Chelsea's intention since hiring Pochettino was always to assess his performance together with the performance of the club as a whole at the end of the first season in charge, regardless of fluctuation in form and results. Which is very important to understand the whole context here, because you might say, okay, our league standing, we're not in the top 4, that's not great. We might not even get into Europe next season, not great. Conference League, it's Europe, but we don't want to play there, let's be honest. Europa League, fine. We'll take it because we can't get anything else. But you have to take everything that has happened into consideration when you make that decision for next season. You do not want to sack the coach right now just because we did not end up in the Champions League, or just because we did not end up with a trophy, even though we reached the semi-final and we reached a final as well domestically. No, you want to look at the whole story. You want to look at the fact that you brought in a lot of kids, a lot of inexperienced players. You want to look at the fact that we had, double-digit injuries throughout the season, 14 injuries when we played against Spurs. Just doesn't make any sense. And if you look at the picture right here, we're the number one team. We're the number one team when it comes to injuries. So you have to take all of that into consideration. And if anything, the stats I showed you at the start of this video is an indication that despite all of that, we are performing quite well. Give them more time. Now, like Pochettino said at the start of this video, it's not always the board, the club, the owners that will decide whether or not a coach stays next season, right? There's also the other side of things, where the coach might say, look, I don't think you're giving me the confidence. I don't think you're working with me. I don't think you're going to get me the right players to bring us back on top. And so it's not worth it for me to stay another season. Plus, of course, if he gets fired, gets sacked, he gets paid compensation. If he leaves, probably not. And here's what he had to say in the latest press conference.
No, I say, they can say tomorrow, until here we arrive, or maybe tomorrow I can say, look, I want to leave. It's two parts that they can take a decision. It's not only, because Chelsea is not happy, or the owner are not happy, or the sporting director. Maybe we are not happy because we are right here for some job to do, but on the end it's not happening what we expect, and maybe we are not happy. I don't say that I am not happy, but it's always is like in one side. In another side, maybe say, okay, maybe until here, and we split. It's not a problem. It's not going to be the end of the world.
I mean, more recently, he has been more direct when it comes to his job, when it comes to the performance of Chelsea, when it comes to basically stating facts. I don't know, is the decision already made? Does he know that he's not going to be here next season? I guess we'll have to wait. Well, is it 2 more weeks, maybe a bit more? But I truly hope he's going to stay here next season, because I really think that, if anything, these last couple of performances have shown what we can do. And this is without all the new players, without all of our top players, let's say, that were still injured throughout the season. So imagine what happens when we have a fit squad. Imagine what happens when we bring in actually an experienced number 9, another great midfielder, and maybe even another center back. In my opinion, things will just get better and better. But of course, I'm not the one in charge. And then who will replace Pochettino? Well, there are a couple of options. I made a video last week, so you can check that out. That's going to be in the top right corner. But of course, do share your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you enjoy this type of videos, leave it a thumbs up, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.